Recording in progress.
Hello Santa Cruz, it's Dr. Duncan McCollum coming to you from KSCO, McCollum Wellness Radio. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to touch bases with you regarding Nikola Tesla in the show that I did last week. I think that it's pretty amazing when we take a look at what can be conceived in somebody's mind and then how they bring that into the physical universe. So I thought I would touch bases on that because I really believe that we could be doing so much more to fulfill our lives. I think that a lot of us have settled, and that's totally fine if that's where you want to be. But I was talking to a group of people the other morning, a business group that I'm in, and I decided to talk about my writing and my dyslexia. And I thought it might be an interesting way to bring about the idea that miracles can happen. When I was very young, I was diagnosed with severe dyslexia at about age, first grade. I made a C backwards, and my teacher immediately said that I was dyslexic. Nobody took the time to sit down and show me the right way to make a C over and over and over again. And it threw me into a confusion because I, had been a fun, bright boy, I thought. And, but all of a sudden I got thrown into this condition, and I know that I had lots of toxins. I used to play with mercury as a kid. We would break open the toys that we got at the local store, and we saved them in little jars, this balls of liquid mercury, and we put it on our hands, and you could put it on a dime and the dime would turn shiny. And I know me being me that I put those in my mouth. But it got so bad that when I was in third grade, there was a reading time, and there was a circle that we would get in, and we would all read. And I was sitting right next to this blind boy named John, and we were reading See Spot Run. And John could read that book beautifully with his hands, and it was amazing, reading Braille. When it came to me, I couldn't even read the first thing on the page. I was so confused on words, and it was very, very troubling. And time went on. I learned to avoid reading. Then I remember in 7th or 8th grade, we were supposed to be reading something like Catcher in the Rye, which I don't even know if they have them read that anymore. But I couldn't read it. I remember sitting in my bedroom crying, and my dad came in, and I was so frustrated, and he tried to help me read, and he couldn't understand why I couldn't read because he'd been offered the Rhodes Scholarship. World War II came along, so he didn't take it, but he was brilliant. And here's this son of his who is functionally illiterate at that point. And, I found ways around it by learning to listen better. Then a lot of you know my story. I broke my back falling out of a tree. The branch broke up on Tightwad Hill in Berkeley. And I fell out of a tree in a seated position, ended up fracturing my back. My 5th lumbar got crushed. But it went undiagnosed because, back in those days, kids were supposed to be seen, not heard. I ended up taking a lot of pain meds. Then I found out that Alice, had a better idea as far as the song White Rabbit, and Grace Slick, the pills that mother gave you never did anything at all. Go ask Alice when you're 10 feet tall. And so I started taking different types of drugs to try to check out of the back pain and of the fact that I was having trouble in school and couldn't read. I don't think I read a book the whole time that I was in high school and junior high or before. I couldn't read it. I was so frustrated, and then I would get by with C's, maybe D's, but I could listen well enough to pass the tests. And so it was very frustrating. In fact, I did read one book, and that was called The Hobbit, but it took me 2 years to read it. I was so interested. But I got into a point where I was self-medicating myself from the pain of probably social issues from not being able to read in school. And so I had to make that right by being loaded all the time, as well as the back pain. And it got to be so chronic that I didn't even care to try to read a book. I thought, oh, who would read a book when you could be outside? That was my excuse. So at any rate, life went on. They let me out of school half a year early because I wasn't doing anything there. They were kind enough to graduate me. My dad told me later that the principal had called him in and said, your son's illiterate. He's not going to make anything out of his life. Just be aware of that. And this was devastating because my older brother had passed away a few years earlier. And so here's the other son who, is functionally illiterate. But, life went on. I finally one day, I hurt my back so bad, not even knowing it was broken. I was flat on my back for 3 weeks until two friends of mine, against my will, carried me into a chiropractor's office. They drove me down in the back of my own pickup with a couch that they took out of my living room and drove me to this chiropractor's office, and they carried me in. They had to hold me up to get the x-ray. Dr. York took the x-ray, stuck it up on the view box and pointed to it and said, when did you break your back? I burst into tears because nobody had ever taken me seriously about my back and the pain I was in. There were always growing pains. All the coaches in school would kind of look at you as lazy because you didn't want to run around the track or lift weights or do any of these things. So at any rate, the reason I'm telling this story is because after last week's show, I started to think, how far up is up? I've been in practice for almost 35 years. I love being a chiropractor. If it wasn't for chiropractic saving my life by getting me walking again, I don't know what I would have done. But I had to overcome my reading problem that was so ingrained that it stopped me a couple times. I tried to go to Cabrillo and I dropped out. And one time the chemistry teacher passed back our tests and had us pass it to the person next to us, who happened to be this girl that I liked. And he said, you guys are so blah, blah, blah. One of you even spelled acid, A-S-I-D. And I looked over at my paper that this girl was grading, and sure enough, it was me. Humiliating again. So I dropped out of school again. Finally, what ended up happening is my health had gotten so poor from the drugs I was taking, and that I almost OD'd, and it became a turning point in my life. I pretty much quit all of the things that I had taken cold turkey. I started, of course, with marijuana back in the early days, back in 7th grade, I think, and I'm so glad it was not a gateway drug, because if it had, well, I'm sure it had nothing to do with all of the psychedelics I took, the LSD, the opium, the mescaline, the mushrooms, the peyote, and then the uppers and downers and all those things had nothing to do with the gateway drug. So that was good to know. However, I was able to kick it all because I almost OD'd and my life seemed more important to me than that, to waste it on such. So the cool thing is, and one of the reasons I'm bringing all this up, is going from functionally illiterate at 28 years old, where literally I still couldn't read a comic strip. Somebody would give me a comic strip with 4 or 5 words per square, 4 squares, and they'd give it to me and I'd try to read it, and by the time I was done with the first square, they'd laugh like I should have gotten the joke by then. So I would laugh and hand it back to them and go, wow, that was really funny. Had no idea what it said. So I decided, I was with my sister and my dad, first trip we'd taken together since my mother had passed away. I was 28, so it'd been, 11 years since my mother died. And I was working on my sister's back, just rubbing her back, and she said, you're so good with your hands. And I go, yeah, I just seem to have a knack. And she goes, it's too bad you didn't go on to be a chiropractor. And I went, yeah, I know. She goes, oh, it's not too late. And like that, a light went off, and I made the decision to go become a chiropractor again. But this one was, undeniably I was going to do it. So she mentioned, well, you've got to handle your reading problem. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. But she was able to help me, direct me towards a group of individuals that helped me with that. I did something called the Basic Study course, and found out that I had been missing so many of the basics on reading, on grammar, on vocabulary, and all of these different things that I had completely missed in school because I was so devastated early on. Well, I got with a study group and a couple friends of mine, Dr. Fernando Luque. We went all the way through Cabrillo together. I was glued to his shoulder. Brilliant fellow, helped me study. We would do all of our chemistry, our physics, all of the math, the anatomy, physiology, microbiology, all that stuff. He was right there with me, and I could learn it because he was vocalizing it, or we would vocalize it, and then that way I could remember it. What's amazing coming from that point is now I'm an author of 6 books. So kind of the main thing I wanted to bring up is you can do, we all have so many amazing things inside us that we can do. And I'm not tooting my horn. I'm blown away at the fact that I even wrote 1 book or even read a book, But I thought it might be helpful to just kind of go through what happened in my life, because other people might go, you know what, maybe I can do something different. My first book is called The Adventures of Little Big Jim. And it was a story that I used to tell my kids. And I would tell them bedtime stories. And then one day, years later, my youngest son, Angus, said, why don't you write a book? And I kind of laughed, and, he persisted. And because of him, I finally did write my first book, The Adventures of Little Big Jim, and published it in November of 2017. So here I was, functionally illiterate at 28, had changed my mind, made some decisions, set some goals, and then found a roadmap to the goal, whether it was chiropractic school, and I found the tools necessary to get me there. I had my friend Fernando, who I studied with. I had a good support system with my father and my sister. And I also had to remove myself from the people that I'd hung out with. The people I hung out with were still partying. And I knew that if I hung out with those people, I would never make it. So I had to make some tough decisions. And I remember hearing from a friend that you will be in 3 to 5 years like the people you hang out with and the books you read. Well, I immersed myself in learning how to read, hanging out with highly motivated people, most of them way more smart than me, much more intelligent than me, and motivated to do something with their lives. And by hanging out with them and having a core group, I actually made it through school. Now, what's interesting, and I was telling this to a patient today, right around 7th quarter, I was doing construction to help put myself through school, and I had a big jackhammer, and I was working in a garage, and I was jackhammering at an angle and using my body to hold that jackhammer up. Well, what ended up happening is I injured my low back again so severely because of the impact of the jackhammer, the weight of the jackhammer, and the constant repetitive trauma of it, that I was unable to move again. I was what's called antalgic, when I was leaning over to one side so far because of the back pain and severe sciatica pain. And I had a choice: drop out of school for a quarter, lose all of my study group, all of my core people that had helped me get to where I was, or suffer on through. So there was no way in the world I was going to drop out of that quarter. So I remember going from class to class, the bell would ring and I'd have to walk, across campus to the next class in utter pain, severely bent over, but I wasn't going to lose my group. My group got me through. So, you will be like the people you hang out with and the books you read in 3 to 5 years. And I hung out with these guys. They helped me as much as they could. And then in September of 1989, I graduated chiropractic school. But that wasn't necessarily the point of this. The point is that miracles can happen. And no matter where we are in life and how far down we might seem to be, we have a choice every day. And many days I struggle with my choice. I struggle with what I want to get done. And a lot of times I don't get done what I want to do. But, if you make a decision, amazing things can happen. My second book came out about the same time, maybe a couple months after The Adventures of Little Big Jim, February 2018, Coaling Station A. This book is about Coalinga. You might have passed it going down to south towards Bakerfield. It's a big oil town, the little oil town. My grandpa was born in 1883. He was the editor of the paper when oil hit in 1910-ish. And it was a wild, woolly west. It was the black gold of California, the second gold rush. And lots of roughnecks there, lots of stories of Whiskey Row being laid low, and all of the stuff that goes on with that. So I created, out of the stories my grandpa told me, Coaling Station A, which is a murder mystery. And one of the things I love most in writing is building characters. So you come up with a character and then start to build on that and create the way they talk, the way they think, some of their personality traits. It's so much fun. And I just started doing this, and I would sit down at my computer, and luckily I'm not a very fast typer, and that was good because I couldn't think any faster than I could type. So it worked out relatively well for me to type a little bit as I was thinking, and I would go, what happened next? What happened next? What happens next? And what's really cool is I remember when I would tell my kids bedtime stories with Little Big Jim the first time, when I got to the end of the most likely scenario, I'd go, and guess what happened? And they would end the story on the most likely scenario, and I go, no. And I'd take a left turn and tell a whole different version of what would have happened. And they loved it, and it was fun, but it also helped create this imagination for me to not have to just kind of go the most obvious path. So the kids were really instrumental in helping with that. But sometimes people go, well, how do you get so much done? How do you write books? I like to play music. I've written several songs, being a chiropractor, being a dad, and all this stuff. Well, I don't think I get enough done. I want to do more. I think that we have set our limitations too low, and some of us are totally happy doing what you're doing. That's awesome. My hat's off to you. I just simply love to do more. And so I continued to write a few more books. I'm going to take a short break here in a minute, and then we'll come back and I'll tell you a little bit more about how I've created these books, and maybe it will help you decide an area of your life that you want to expand in, and just know you can do it. It's totally possible for you to do it. So this is Dr. Duncan McCollum, McCollum Wellness Radio. I'll be back in just a couple minutes. Okay, I'm back. This is Dr. Duncan McCollum back, and we are talking about being creative and having no sky as a limit for you and the people you know. Try to encourage your friends. We come out of a time right now where there's so much suppression put on us through the whole event of the last 2 years, where many people have been afraid to go out of their house. They've been afraid to socialize. The children of this age, I feel so terrible for. Growing up in those formative years, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, with having to wear a mask for 2 years, being afraid of their shadows. What's going to happen to them? But I think great things are going to come of it, because where there's great diversity and great challenges, great things happen. And my whole goal is to have any of you out there take a look at where you are right now in your life and go, you know what? I'm going to make something awesome happen. And I really believe you can. So I'm talking about the fact that I was functional illiterate up until I was 28 years old. I'd been on so many drugs, street drugs mainly, but also some pharmaceuticals for the pain that I'd been in. And it became a crutch for me and an escape for me. Something that for many years of my life, from age 12 to 28, whatever that is, 16 years, I was constantly inebriated on some kind of medication, whether it was alcohol, marijuana, or any other kind of drugs and painkillers, because part of it was the physical pain, but also the emotional, mental pain of not being able to read and being diagnosed with dyslexia, but with no real solution. And what's really interesting is I don't really think I ever had dyslexia. I think I had a learning disability, and the disability was not necessarily mine. I was part of the problem, but it was the disability of the teachers of the time to really understand how to help me read, how to help me learn. There's a book behind me called The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America that goes into our education system. But that's a subject for a different day. So I actually started writing when I was 61 years old. I never in my life dreamed of writing a book. I never wanted to write a book. But because of the bedtime stories I told, my kids talked me into it. My first book, again, was it's about my family came across the plains in 1850 in what's called an ox cart. And they walked, and anything you wanted was in the ox cart. And they ended up settling in Salinas. They were some of the first settlers there, Anglos. And my great-great-grandfather became the first marshal of Salinas. And there were tons of kids there, brothers, mainly 7 brothers. My dad's father had 7 brothers born in the 1800s. And so there were lots of stories about what happened with some of the West there, some of the banditos like Tabucha Vasquez and different Walking Marietta, what happened to Walking Marietta and Three Finger Jack. And I would listen to these stories sitting around while all my great uncles that were, born in the 1800s would tell me these stories of Three Finger Jack and Black Bart. And my mind would always just conceive of these amazing things. So I think I always had that adventure in my mind, and it was just a matter of getting it out in a book and reading. So I started to read a little bit. I started to read Louis L'Amour, who had become my favorite author. I read all 109 books or however many several times. So a lot of my books have that flavor in them. But anyway, Little Big Jim, this kid lived in Monterey, and he had a big mind. He lived in the foothills of Carmel, actually. And he gets shanghaied, and the story goes on from there. The third book I wrote was a sequel to Little Big Jim. It's called Journey's End. And Journey's End goes to China in 1864. And China in 1864 was really interesting. You couldn't, foreigners could not go more than 150 feet into China, but you could go there to trade. It was mainly in the China Sea and Canton. And I had to learn so much about the Chinese Qing dynasty, Qing, which came right after the Ming dynasty. It was the last dynasty. And, when I started looking into it and I found out about the 8 Bajing, which were the 8 demigods that were always traveling together throughout the 10,000 year history of China's cultures. And I started to look into people like the Red Flag Fleet and Madame Chang, who had the biggest pirate fleet in the history of the world. She had over something like 50,000 people in her fleet, and she was unstoppable. She beat not only the Imperial Navy, but the Chinese Imperial Navy, but they also asked the English, the Portuguese, and the French to help defeat her, and she defeated all of them as well. So I found out about this stuff, and I put it in my book, and I had to find out about the crane and the peach and the cricket and the colors and all these different symbols of the Chinese culture, and what how they affect what the theory is behind them, or the belief system is behind them. And then a friend of mine introduced me from a fellow from China who read my book, and he goes, "How did you know all this stuff? I've looked up all these facts, are all written down. I've never heard of these until I found them in your book. How did you learn it?" And I go, "Well, I just, I Google." I sat on my, I sat in my bed or in the living room and just Googled all of this stuff, and I had to tie it together, and it was so interesting. So he's translated 3 of my books into Mandarin now. So Little Big Jim, Journey's End, and Kaleidoscope, my 4th book, are all translated into Mandarin. I haven't got them published yet because that takes a little bit of effort, and I've been busy making a living, doing my day job. But at any rate, the 4th book is called Kaleidoscope, and it's my grandfather's youngest brother, Charles, was a pilot in World War I. And this is a story about him being shot down over enemy lines into Germany's occupation of France on the other side of the Somme River. And I probably pronounced that wrong. But anyway, it's a really cool story about this guy that gets shot down over there, and what happens to him, and how growing up in the foothills of California gave him the tools that he needed in order to survive being shot down. Those tools were passed down through my family, through all the time I spent in the Sierras, backpacking, learning from my ancestors and my grandparents and my family, my father, how to actually live out in nature and to survive. So that's that book. But again, I was functionally illiterate at 28 years old, and then something changed in my life, almost killed me. I hope it doesn't get that far for you, but something made me decide to change my life. And from there, I've got a long ways to go. Believe me, I'm not arrived anywhere. I'm just sitting here humbly trying to help as many people as I can overcome the pains that they get from the accidents of life that might have happened 30, 40, 50 years ago. A lot of you know that in November of last year, my appendix ruptured and I was in the hospital for 5 days. Totally blew me away because I'm a relatively healthy guy at this point in my life. But it's all those things that happened before I cleaned myself up that are setting the stage for my future health. However, I've done a lot. I've worked with one of the great scientists that studied under Linus Pauling. Dr. Jeffrey Bland is an amazing fellow. Back in the early 2000s, I studied with him and a group of doctors that were really taking a look at genetics and, how does the organs of the body detoxify? How does the liver detoxify? And new things were being discovered all the time about that. And even now today, it's even fantastic working with Dr. Dan Pompa, and what we look at a cellular level. You fix a cell to get well is what he says. And which brings me to my next 2 books. The first of which was called, in book number 5, New Hope for Sciatica. And I decided after writing 4 fiction books that I wanted to write a science book, but I didn't know how. Fiction was easy. I just sat down and daydreamed and wrote. But I took a course with about 30 other students. We were from all over the country. world, actually. And then we had 9 weeks to write a book, and they gave us the guidelines on how to do it, how we do a chapter, how many words you type a minute, what your ideal reader's dream was, and their dream come true, what their ruin was. And so I wrote New Hope for Sciatica, which is based on cellular detoxification. The funny part is I developed a severe bout of sciatica in October 2nd of 2021. Interesting, the day my brother had died, many years earlier, but I was at a Giants game and I couldn't drive home because my pain was so bad. I luckily had 2 docs here at my office to work because I couldn't walk. I could not get to, I couldn't even go shopping. I couldn't go halfway through the store until the pain was so severe. I had to turn around and ask my son or daughter to shop for me. And then in November, I was getting adjusted by a friend. I stepped off his table and my appendix ruptured. Amazing pain. But the minute my appendix ruptured, my sciatic pain went away, which I should have read my own book, because it talks about hidden infections. And hidden infections, which was what's going on with the appendix, was inflaming the whole right quadrant of my lower abdomen. And that was causing severe pressure on the sciatic nerve with an already crushed vertebra and lots of degenerative arthritis in there. So it made the little tiny hole the nerve could come out of even more compressed. MRIs and medical doctors and friends that were reading radiologists said, you're going to need to get that opened up with surgery. Then my appendix ruptured and the pain went away. So I should have read my own book, New Hope for Sciatica. So again, to me, being able to go from illiteracy to writing a book is a path that I would have never expected me to write. What's the path that you want to go on? Where are you today, and what would you like to achieve in the next year? You know, I mean, in this course, I was given 9 weeks to write a book. Never thought it would happen. I'd already written 4. A lot of the people in our course had never written any, but we all got that book done in 9 weeks, amazingly enough. Unfortunately, the day this book came out with the 30 other books that my friends had written, as we were celebrating in Washington, D.C., doing a launch of our books, my book was banned from Amazon because I had written the word COVID in the preface of the book. And that was spotted right then, was a dirty word. You couldn't say it, you couldn't talk about it, you couldn't write about it. And so my book was banned for 3 weeks until I rewrote those paragraphs and took the word out. Now you can get it in its full unabridged version. All my books are on Amazon under Duncan McCollum, or Dr. Duncan McCollum. So I liked writing books. I still do. I hadn't written one since COVID started, but I liked the story, telling a story better than just the facts, which is kind of like New Hope for Sciatica is more the facts. So Turn Back Your Biological Clock was the next book I wrote. And I wrote this, it came out in COVID. Let's see, when did it actually, but copyright 2021. So what I did is I took the information on how to take people with chronic disease, which 80 million Americans have multiple chronic diseases, according to Michigan University study. 60% of Americans are diabetic or pre-diabetic. There's 30 million Americans diagnosed with thyroid disease. And I thought, I'm going to write a book, write a story, but put the information they need to know to turn back their biological clock or get their health back in that story. So I did that with the help of, I hired the company again to help me. 9 weeks, I had to get the book written. Pretty amazing. And I just had a patient the other day, a really nice woman came in and she said, I love your book. I love the way you interweave the information I need to know so that I can get healthy in a story setting that is pleasing and keeps you entertained as you read the book. So that is the story of Turn Back Your Biological Clock, book number 6. So I have a few more books going. The third in the sequel of Little Big Jim is called Bruxa de Mar, which means the sea witch in Portuguese. It's halfway done, but the boat, Bruxa de Mar, is stuck floating in a windless ocean right now and has been for 2 years. So it's lying dormant, and I tried to get back to it, but I haven't yet. But I've started a new book about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I think it's going to be really good. It's in the New Hope series, New Hope 4, and it's a health book, and I'm not going to let the title out yet because I haven't exactly named it, but I don't want to let the cat out of the bag till it's almost done. But this book is really trying to help people like the baby boomers in their 60s, the sexagenarians and beyond, get a new lease on life, potentially start fresh or pick up something you really like, dust it off and look at it in a new unit at a time. So many people have gotten to a point where it's just business as usual. You know, you get up, morning Ralph, morning Martha, click, click, hit the clock, go to work, come home, you know, talk to each other, then go to bed, or maybe they have a relationship, maybe they don't. A lot of people in our age group have no relationship. They've never succeeded in getting into a relationship, or they've had love and lost for whatever reason, infidelity, infirmary, trauma, war, who knows what. But, you know, there's so much life in us still to live, and it's just a matter of catching that glimpse of something, that little gossamer in the wind that's floating by, that you can grab onto that and float with it and go with it, and maybe change a few things in your life. Maybe you don't want to, and that's fine. Maybe you're totally happy doing what you're doing, and my hat's off to you. I wish I was, but I'm not. I have to do something else. I'm constantly trying to solve new problems. I think the mind is a thing that loves to pose and solve problems. So if you give yourself big enough problems, your mind's going to go about solving them for you. So my new book has, every chapter has a song title as the name of that chapter. A lot of the songs are from the 70s when I grew up. And I'm going to read you a little bit of it because I think it might give you an understanding of where I'm going with this, and also help you spot a time when you really knew who you wanted to be, or that you wanted to be, or that there was something greater out there than you even knew could be. You know, I think at an early age, as we daydreamed as a kid, where would we go with those daydreams? You know, they were not in the physical room that we were in. They were somewhere else. They were in a vast playground, or of who knows what kind of planet they were on, or, you know, I remember tapping into these so many times as a kid, only to be snapped out of it by a teacher telling me not to daydream, and, you know, something else going on in the family, or what have you. So we're going to take my second break here, and this is Dr. Duncan McCollum talking to you about creativity today, and that there's really, any of us have the potential to do so much more, and don't second guess yourself. Just start. When I was talking to this group this morning about these books, one of the women said, you know, I've always wanted to write 2 books. I have an idea here and here. And all you need to do is just start, to sit down and just get your typewriter. That's what works best for me. And just type. And then don't rethink it. You type and go on, type and go on, type and go on. What I learned in the class, where we had to do it in 9 weeks, is you write for 2 hours, set a clock, write for 2 hours. At the end of that 2 hours, that chapter's done. Don't reread it, go on. I was going, great, how's that going to work? Well, it works. So anyway, this is Dr. Duncan McCollum, McCollum Wellness Radio, and I'll be back in just a couple minutes. See you in a sec. Okay, Dr. Duncan McCollum here, McCollum Wellness Radio. A little bit different show today. I've been trying to change it up a little bit. Last week I talked about Tesla and some of the things that he went through. You know, he was an amazing guy. AC alternating current was what he discovered and really pushed. And because of him, we have refrigerators and we have power that can go for miles and miles and miles and miles along lines, where the DC current would not do that Thomas Edison was working with. But somehow or other, Tesla got bought out. He got crushed basically and died penniless at 80 some years old in a apartment in New York City. So at any rate, I'm going to read you just a little bit of chapter 2 of my new book, New Hope 4. And because I think maybe if you can get the idea of what I'm talking about, you can find this area for yourself and perhaps do something with it. So chapter 2 is called It's Just My Imagination Running Away With Me, which of course is a song sung by the Temptations and the lyrics by Barrett Strong. But so here we go. One of my earliest memories is of playing in a small patch of dirt under a huge sycamore tree in our front yard on Garber Street. I had a little dinky truck my older brother had given me and could spend hours driving it among the large roots which extended outward from the tree's massive trunk. Life was so perfect then. I must have been 3.5 years old. I still can recall the daydreamy-like feeling I had. The warm autumn air filled with the aromas of the drying sycamore leaves, the smell of the Berkeley Hills, San Francisco Bay, and the scent of fresh cut lawns, wafting their way into my olfactory glands, the oldest, most primordial reptilian perception our body possesses. Everything seemed so perfect then. I was just old enough to conceive of life as a sentient being and was seeming to tap into some recall of a tremendous love, the vastness of life, some yearning to be. It was as though I was living in a parallel universes, 3 years old in one while living eternally in the next. There was a feeling of some connection into a realm I knew not what of. My whole world was there in that small dirt plot, yet I felt as though I was tapping into the limitlessness, the woof and wharf of the universe, and that I was playing an integral part of the creation and destruction of every aspect of it. It seemed that thousands of motion pictures were all flowing through my head at once, and that I was the main character, perceiving all motion, visions, sense, and emotions simultaneously. From the thrill of victory to the agony of defeat, my mind, body, and emotions were dragged through the muck and mire of livingness to the elation and triumph of conquest beyond imagination. I would have loved to remain in that bubble for eternity. It seemed my whole body was flooded with serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin, a perfect hormonal combination culminating in a state of bliss. Then came that moment of interruption as my well-intended mother called me to lunch. As I was startled out of my reverie, those hormones seemed to be washed from my bloodstream in a nanosecond, leaving me with a feeling of withdrawal, emptiness, and defeat. As I disconnected from my daydream, I felt a surge of sadness, despair, like I'd lost all that I'd ever known and loved. It was as though I was reliving the culmination of the emotions of tragedy, agony, and loss experienced over eons and a multitude of lifetimes. That little patch of dirt, again, was just that. It was as though all memories, dreams, and imaginings had been violently stripped from my consciousness, leaving in its wake a hollowness, a vacuum of emotions. That was over 60 years ago, yet the emotional impact of that moment has remained always somewhere in my subconscious. It seems that for my entire life, somehow I've been longing to find that place again, that location, that power of creation and the island in the sun. So, I'm wondering how many of you have recall those moments as a kid or sometime in your life where you weren't really right in the room you were in. You were in another universe. You were dreaming or imagining or remembering or recalling some other greatness or some other beingness that you'd been. I think that a lot of the drug addicts, we always hear of the guy getting high and then you never get that first high again. Well, it's not just the drug, it's the love, it's the communication, the connection, the foods. There's something that we long for to get back. And I think if we are not careful, that not categorizing that where it belongs, it could get in the way of relationships, it could get in the way of family, with work, with your ambitions. A lot of us have maybe given up on the fact that there is that place to go again, or maybe you never really allowed yourself to be there. But remember Tesla, he could imagine in his mind a whole complex motor system or physics, the laws of physics, and he would put it all together in his mind. And when he built it, it worked perfectly every time. His imagination was so vast. Yours is too. If you just allow yourself to use it and, just dare to dream. Dare to dream. Dare to wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to be somebody different today. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to say hello to people. I'm going to make somebody happy today. I'm going to call somebody that I haven't talked to in quite a while and just say, hey, I was just thinking of you. I talked to one of my best friends from high school yesterday, good old Ken. And we were really best friends for a long time. And, he lives out in Nashville now, and it was great to talk to him. And, it's funny, you hear his voice and he sounds 17. And that agelessness was there. And you look at yourself in the mirror and you go, well, I don't look 17 anymore. But the mind and us as spiritual beings, we are ageless. So don't let the physical body and the ailments of the body hold you down. They're potentially holding your body down. But, you have so much power. The innate intelligence that lives inside of us is the greatest physician that ever lived. There's so much that it can do, not only to fix you physically, but mentally. And you just have to get a bigger dream. They say if you want to get something done, give it to a busy person. Don't give it to somebody who has nothing to do, because idle hands, they just stay idle. You need to give it to somebody who can get it done. And you know what? Get busy. Find things to do. Hey, listen, I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to you, because I'm my own worst enemy. When I wake up in the morning and the person that's creating more problem in my life than anybody is the one that I look in the mirror in. I see it in the morning and I look at the eyes and I, brush my teeth and I think, what am I going to accomplish today? Or sometimes I think the other things, right? So we're our biggest critic. We are our biggest enemy, but we don't have to be. We can rise above. The song that I play by Steve Funderburg, sung by Lindsey Graham, We Can Rise Above, amazing song, and you can do it. We can be free. You can be free. And I want to encourage you to, write down some goals. Write down where you are with your relationships, with your love life if you have one, and even if you don't, write down that you don't. What would you like it to look like? Then again, look at the mirror, look at yourself in the mirror and go, who's going to be attracted to me? Maybe you got to work on yourself first. I sure did. I'm constantly trying to. But, and beauty is not skin deep. When you find somebody that you feel so comfortable to hang with and love and just be with, that's rare in a way. But when you have misunderstanding and miscommunication in the area, then you're going to find all these reasons to have it not work. Remember, you give the mind a problem and it's going to find a way to solve that problem. So if you start to get critical of that other person, whether it's a relationship, a family member, or somebody you work with, what have you, and you start to do things that are going to differentiate you from that person, guess what? Your mind's going to find a reason for you to quit or get fired, or for you to break up, because the mind poses and solves problems. So be careful what you wish for. One of my greatest coaches always say, what you think about, you talk about. What you talk about, you bring about. And he also said, the hole you get through is never bigger than the hole you give through. The hole you get through is never bigger than the hole you give through. So we've got a couple minutes left here. I want to finish a little bit more on this new book that I'm writing. And so here we go. So we were talking about me and that little patch of dirt, and how that just, today I remembered it was like a whole world. It was the vastness of the universe that I was in. I tapped into something, and it was so amazing. And my imagination, perhaps, memory, perhaps, who knows, but it was so much that, here I am 66 years old. It was 63 years ago, and I remember it as though it were today. And if I use that as a motivation to tap me into creating things, then it's useful. If not, it's just a nice memory. So that was over 60 years ago, yet the emotional impact of that moment has remained always somewhere in my subconscious. It seems that for my entire life, somehow I've been longing to find that place again, that location, that power of creation, the island in the sun. Were those the sensations and emotions evoked in the hearts and minds of the men of Sparta in their quest to save beautiful Helena, inciting the Trojan War? After all, she is said to have been the most beautiful woman in the world, daughter of Zeus and Leda, the face that launched 1,000 ships. What part did Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and sexuality, have in the heart-wrenching story of stolen love, as she promised Helena to another, Alexander, the son of King and Queen of Troy? For it was Alexander who soon seduced Helena, stealing her away from King Menelaus of Sparta and carrying her off to Troy. So here we have this beautiful love relationship. Here is, Helen, who was married to King Menelaus, if that's how you say his name, and then somehow stolen by from Alexander of Troy, and started the Trojan War. And who's playing these games with us? How come we just can't be happy? Finding the right person. Then it says, could the mortals of earth yet be the pawns in the game of the mythical Greek and Roman gods as they played out their fantasies on the earthly victims of love won and lost? Or is it possible for us to rise above the secrets and confusions laid down over the centuries regarding life, love, and the pursuit of happiness? I vote for the second. So I remember as a kid watching some, like Jason and the Argonauts or some of those movies, and there was a scene where the gods were laying out on the clouds, and there was a hole in the clouds, and there were, Aphrodites and Zeus and these people, and they were looking down on the mortals of earth, playing games like they were chess. And this group would go to war for that group to appease this god or that god. And we are either cause over our lives, or we're the effect of something else that has been done to us. Oftentimes we're the effect of our own cause, which means we do something that was not really a good thing to do, and then we regret it, or because of it we trip ourselves up. But we have to let go of that. So I believe that in all of us there exists a desire to be free. I also believe that we have the ability to achieve unlimited goals. But as we begin to blunder forward on our journey through this life with no real understanding of the rules, we have broken our toes and bloodied our nose to a point where our ability to see the world clearly has been tainted by pain, sorrow, and humiliation. That we have made it this far as a species is a miracle and inspiration. So anyway, I hope this has been interesting. I'm trying to mix it up a little bit from my normal shows talking about cellular inflammation. You can find all of my shows on my podcast, McCollum Wellness Radio podcasts. They're, any place, Spotify or Apple Music, wherever you go. I've got over 80 of those, of my shows up there. I also have my YouTube channel Dr. Duncan McCollum, and there's probably at least 100 of my shows up there. We're getting more and more up as I get the means, which means young people, to help me do that. So I really appreciate KSCO Radio. I appreciate Michael Zwirling and all of the personnel there. They allow this to happen. They keep it going. My hat is off to them, and I would encourage you to, if you got a little extra money you want to help out and for the radio station you love, send them a check and just say, hey, this is a donation. Keep it going, because it's the only station like this, right? And in fact, the station, if you know where it is on Portola, it is the only existing RCA model that is a true radio station anymore. They built it after I think it was a 34 or 40s RCA recording studio. And it's now, when you go in there, you can see where they did the recording. It's now a radio station. There's only one other in existence, but it's not a functioning radio show. So we have an amazing piece of history in KSCO. We have a lot of great people on all spectrums. You can get on there and you can talk about what you want to talk about. Michael Zwirling and the staff are very willing to let us get on there and talk our minds. So I'll be back next week. I'm going to just throw this out to you, the 7th caller to call the radio station, 479-1080. The 7th caller is going to win a pair of tickets to a dinner I'm doing Monday night at Michael's on Main. So call and talk to David, and the 7th caller will be able to bring a friend and come to a dinner that my office is putting on. I'll be doing a little talk about health, and then we'll be enjoying a nice dinner. The doors open at 6 and they close at 6:25. If you're after that, you won't be let in. So 7th caller, 479-1080. Would love to have a lucky guest and their guest come to the show, come to the dinner. So again, I've been talking about my dyslexia, how severe it was that in 3rd grade, a blind kid could read Braille better than I could read words on a page. I couldn't read anything. In high school, I never read a book. I got away with not reading a book and pretty much being loaded the whole time to cover up my sorrows. And finally at 28, something happened where I decided that it was time to do something different. And you can listen to Steve Funderburg's song about that. It's time to make a change. And it's all been uphill from there with a very bumpy road. It's bumpy every day. I wake up and I go, what am I doing? What can I do to improve myself? How did I get in this mess anyway? And but remember, the mind is there to pose and solve problems. So give it some big problems and let them solve it for you. Listen to what's right and ethical, and you might just help somebody. If you're not going to help yourself, help somebody else. I've written 6 books. They're all, you can get them all on Amazon, and 4 of them are historical fiction. I would be honored if you would get on there and buy one, read it, comment on it, email me at info@mccollumwellness.com and let me know what you feel about it, what your experience is with it, and that would be awesome. So again, thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
Recording stopped.